Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. And if this is the first time you're stumbling across my channel, welcome, happy to have you. And if you're a regular here, you'll know this is a little bit outside my normal content. I don't break down a lot of TV shows. There's really only a couple that I do that for. I've done it for Bridgerton, I do it for Outlander, and I think that's pretty much it. But being a romance reviewer and book lover, you know, I'm normally focused that way. But I stumbled across this TV show back in 2020, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And I am happy to say that its popularity has only grown through seasons 3 and 4, so much so to the point that season 4's premiere was literally like counter-programming to The Walking Dead when it premiered. And so it's coming back on November 13th, and I am so excited for season 5. But I just wanted to promo it a little bit, talk about it a little bit, gush about my favorite parts. And so I thought the best way to do that was to do a video that's a little bit of like an overview, as well as kind of a everything you need to know, but maybe not every little bit you need to know, right? Like every little bit you need to know, you should go watch this wonderful show, because there's only 39 episodes. There's 9 or 10 episodes per season. And so, you know, it's not like there is a huge backlog to binge. It's definitely doable between now and next week. But if you don't have time for that, or you're not sure if you want to commit to it, which I completely understand. Again, being a book reviewer, I'm usually spending most of my time reading, not watching TV. So when I make a pause from that to pick up my remote, it better be for something good. And to me, Yellowstone is that thing. So again, go ahead and get a drink, get a snack, pull up a seat, and let's go ahead and dive into this. Like I said, this is gonna be like what you need to know from Jen at the Book Refuge point of view. If you need more than that, like, you're gonna have to do some of the research yourself. I'm only a cheat sheet for you if you trust me and if you're going along with what I'm sharing. Also, my biases are gonna come through a little bit. I have distinct favorites in this show, absolutely, and those will come through. So, by the way, I'm gonna be looking this way quite a bit because I have quite a few pages of notes over here to dive into, so just know, if you see me peeking over here, it's not because I'm not interested in paying attention to you out there. It's because I have some notes to make sure that I don't miss anything. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, I'm going to start with a character overview, and I will give a reference photo for them. Should I be able to find one for everybody? Because then once I get into explaining the plots, the overview of each season, I'm just going to put up a picture of the season for reference. I will also have timestamps down below if you want to skip around in this video. Like, let's say you watched the first season and you haven't been back yet, you can go ahead and skip to the part about season 2, okay? If that makes sense. So, just a little bit of a spiel about this. So, Yellowstone is a neo-Western drama. I also call it a cowboy mafia. I'm not the only one who thinks this, but I do have a bit of a bias as a reader. Like I said, I love the mafia and I love cowboys, so this is a great mashing up for me. This is currently on Paramount Network and Peacock. It was created by Taylor Sheridan and John Linson, and it premiered in 2018. There are currently 39 episodes over 4 seasons, and season 5 premieres on November 13th. The series follows the Dutton family, owners of the largest ranch in Montana, the Yellowstone Dutton Ranch, commonly called just the Yellowstone. The plot revolves around family drama at the ranch and the bordering Broken Rock Indian Reservation, the national park, and developers who want to break it up and turn it into resorts or other things as we go along. Key players, again, the people who have the most say, the most dirt gets on their hands as we go through. We have the Dutton family, which when we start out with the very first episode in the beginning, we have John, who is a widower. He lost his wife, Evelyn, quite a few years ago, or Evelyn. We have Lee, we have, who's the oldest son. Then we have Jamie. Then we have Beth. And then we have Casey, who at this time is living on the Broken Rock Reservation with his wife Monica and their young son Tate. So that is our family, as it were, the Dutton family. Then we have the bunkhouse crew, which I just want to mention. Again, when I said that I have biases for the stories, the plot lines, I don't care much about the bunkhouse crew except in a few specific episodes or a few specific situations. Again, that's my bias. I tend to tune out a lot of the bunkhouse storylines. I just don't care about them. You're gonna have to go to another review or another breakdown to care more about them, but I am gonna mention them because they'll come up sometimes. And of course, I don't include Rip Wheeler, the foreman, the enforcer, the badass around the ranch, as someone I don't care about. I very much care about Rip, okay? I definitely have biases. So yeah, we have Rip Wheeler, and then we have Lloyd, who's been around for a very long time. We have Jimmy, who we will talk about in first season. He's very new to all of this. He was a bit of a druggie and his life is going in a bad direction when he gets scooped into everything. We have Ryan and Colby, who are just kind of our generic muck yucks who at various different points have storylines that are alright. We have Walker, who is in and out of the first couple seasons, but he's someone who is just getting out of prison when we meet him, and the Yellowstone needs to recruit some people, and so Rip actually gets him when he's getting out of prison. And he doesn't quite like all of the nastiness he sees going around at the Yellowstone, but he gets roped in a bit deeper than he expects. And then we also have Jake, who is definitely a staple. We don't see him too much, but he's someone who's like always there and has been a steady hand for a while, so it'd be a shame to not mention him. And then we have Teeter, who joins in, I think season 3 we get her in, and she is very much the optimum of a hillbilly redneck, but we love her. We absolutely love her. And then there are a few other random ladies who are there now and then, causing problems, having drama, sleeping with the men there. Again, don't really care too much for those. We also have members of the reservation that are important to the story. We have Chief Thomas Rainwater. He is, I believe, just becoming chief at the beginning of the series and very much wants to make his stamp on the area and is causing a lot of friction in the beginning of the show. We have Mo, who is Rainwater's driver and bodyguard. I really like Mo. We have Felix Long, who is Monica's grandfather, and we have Angela Blue Thunder, who is a tribal lawyer. Of course, there are many more people on the reservation, but I'm only touching on ones who, that we see the most. And then we have politicians and enemies and other people in the area that would be important. And they're going to span over all the seasons, but I'm going to list the people that will come up in my overviews that I'm about to get into. So we have Dan Jenkins, who is one of our main antagonists in the beginning. He's a California land developer. We have Governor Linnell Perry. She is not an enemy. She is actually John's side squeeze in the beginning of this show. That's definitely a political alliance for him to, she's very beautiful. He's still a handsome guy, we know, played by Kevin Costner, so he's still hunky. He can still get it when he needs to, but it's also good to keep the governor close. We have Malcolm and Teal Beck, who are an antagonist that shows up along the lines. We have Garrett Randall, who we'll get more into who Garrett Randall is when we get to him, but definitely someone who's an antagonist. We have Rourke Morris. He is a rancher and a stakeholder that is an antagonist later on. We have Caroline Warner, who is a CEO of Market Equities that shows up. We have Sheriff Donnie Haskell, who sometimes an enemy, sometimes an ally, just depends whose pocket he's in at the time. And then we have this woman named Christina, who is a love interest for Jamie at different times, and we'll get into that as we go. So again, those are the people I feel like we're good to mention at the beginning so that you can kind of reference that when they pop up, because again, I'm not going to show their faces all the time. We're going to go by season. So yeah, let's get in now to the season overviews. Now, again, I'm not going over every little bit. I'm going to touch on the plot points and things that are the most important to the story and also most important to me. So here we go. Season 1, oh my gosh, just without even overview, like the beginning of the show opens with such a bang. It starts with this double episode that really is setting all the pieces on the board. It is showing us what is happening in this epic chess match that we are in the middle of. It shows us what the stakes are. It shows us the people involved, and it just grips me. Every time I start at the beginning, I'm like, oh, this show is the best. It's so great. But this starts off with John Dutton, and he has his 4 children, who I've mentioned. And everybody is kind of spread out at the beginning of this, because we have Lee, who is the only son, like actually actively working on the Yellowstone. We have Jamie, who is a lawyer and like a city slicker, but he does do the bidding of his father all the time. We have Beth, who is a financier with a cutting wit and an alcohol problem, who I believe she's working in I can't remember if she's in a different state or where she is, but she's working for a company where she kind of like strips and repurposes things. She's a badass. Her first scenes, we see her. You never know whether you're gonna love or hate her. Obviously, I have a bias. I fucking love Beth. She's my favorite. And then we have Casey, who, as I mentioned, he is living on the reservation with his wife, Monica, and seems to be mostly estranged from the rest of the family. And we don't quite know why, but we know that he is kind of like, he seems to be at peace with where he's at, but he definitely doesn't communicate with his family much at all. And he's very much more involved in life with Monica, although he's a bit of an outsider because he's not a native, though he's living on the reservation with his wife, and they don't quite know what to feel about him sometimes. But there we are with that. So this series, in my opinion, begins like it's going to be the typical cowboys versus the natives that happen in a lot of Westerns, whether that's, you know, like Longmire was, or the way it can be in movies and things like that. And in my opinion, it may start that way, but it doesn't stay that way for very long, because here's the thing, like, John also wants, like, because to him it's like the ranchers and the natives, like, they both kind of go together. It's only when like they start rubbing up against each other the wrong way that John gets protective, and he's like, hey, I don't come onto your space, stay off of mine. And you get into the whole like who really owns the land. So there's those arguments that do always go along with this kind of setup. But again, there are bigger fish that are going to come into this pond than just what's going on with that. So this one does though start off with a cattle and like land dispute that's happening, where the natives, some of them actually like cut the fence, and some cattle of theirs like get out, and then the Yellowstone isn't able to just go and get them back, because then they would be crossing onto native protected lands, and so they can't go and get their cattle back even though their fences were cut and they went over. And so there's this, you know, big dispute starting right off. And at the beginning of this, John is actually the head of the Livestock Commission, which has its own police force and resources and everything, because like cattle management is people's livelihoods. It's a big business. It gets dangerous really fast if people don't follow the rules. And so that's another way that John has his fingers into, you know, legitimate businesses and has power in that aspect. And there's then this dispute that happens where Monica's brother is with a group of natives who are trying to steal the cattle, and Lee, the oldest son, is with the livestock commissioner, and they go out to try to round up the cattle one night, and there's a dispute that happens. There's guns involved, and Casey hears about what's happening, and he goes to see what's going on, and he actually sees Monica's brother shoot his brother, and so then he shoots him. And so we have this like, and this happens right off the bat. So that's why I said like I didn't say too much about Lee, because we lose him pretty much immediately, and his death kind of brings all of the Dutton children back to the ranch. Like, we have Beth coming in, and we have Casey being scared that, you know, he's going to get in trouble for this, so he goes to the Yellowstone. And then we have Jamie, who's trying to keep him out of jail. So we have a lot of drama that goes on with that right away. So then we have, like I said, we have Beth sweeping into town to do her evil magic, and she starts hooking up with her longtime flame and fuck buddy, Rip Wheeler, which we'll get into more. But right away it becomes clear that they have a long-lasting history where Beth comes in, and when she's in, it means they're down to fuck, but then, you know, Rip, it's like maybe clear that he wants more, but she's not ready for it. And so there's this back and forth, and again, highly love that. Definitely love it. Then we find out that Dan Jenkins, the land developer, is starting to make himself a nuisance, trying to start poking around and hoping to use, and this will be a threat that happens anytime you're watching a show about ranching, there is the threat of eminent domain that shows up, okay? It shows up, okay? It shows up in Little House on the Prairie, and it shows up in Yellowstone. And so they're trying to prove that developments that would be put in to bring tourists and out-of-towners in to live, like they want to put up condos, they want to put up a resort, would be good for the economy, and therefore a reason for eminent domain to go into place and let them be able to build there. We also find out that John has some health issues that he's keeping a secret because he doesn't want his enemies or his family to know that he may possibly have cancer. So then, as we said, Casey gets drawn back into the Yellowstone, and he and Monica go through some drama, which ends up with her choosing to take some time away from him. She doesn't want to be involved with his family. We also found out a secret that when Casey and Monica conceived Tate, that John tried to buy her off and get her to have an abortion, and she wouldn't do it. And that's part of the reason why she doesn't like him. But now John, you know, feeling his eminent age, like, you know, he wants to be in Tate's life. And so he's trying to make some amends in that way. And you know what? Hey, you make different decisions in the heat of the moment and when you're younger than you do later. And obviously he doesn't wish his grandson away. He just thought it was ruining his son's life back then. But yeah, going throughout the whole of season 1, like, this is definitely a big argument between Casey and Monica, is because Casey doesn't want to fully reveal his complete past with his family and the things he knows that his family gets into. And he also has some PTSD from his time in was he in like special forces or just had special missions? I don't know, but he has some PTSD to do with that. And, you know, the guilt over killing Robert, the brother. So Casey's keeping a lot of secrets from his wife, and so of course it's going to lead to tension between them, and it's not the best. So, yeah, it ends up with them taking some time apart. Then there is some tension between Rip and Casey, because John wants to give Casey more responsibility on the ranch to kind of keep him there, give him something to do. And Rip is the foreman, right? Like, that's what he does. He would do anything for John. You know, there's more we'll learn about that, but Rip was brought into the family when he was very young. He isn't quite a son at this time, or he doesn't see himself as one, but he definitely looks to John like a surrogate father. And like I said, he is his made man, basically. He would do anything for him. And so when John asks him to step down from that position so that Casey can have it, Rip does it, even though reluctantly, to give Casey that position, because Casey is the blood and he's not, you know. So yeah, so then we have Jamie trying to keep everyone out of jail and keep the laws from being able to strip Yellowstone of land. He gets tapped by the governor to be the next attorney general, but his attention becomes hooked on power that leads him into some sticky situations. We also learn a bit more about how the Yellowstone works, and how it really is like the cowboy mafia, in my opinion. So we have Jimmy, who, like I said, is this young guy who he is getting in with the wrong crowd. And so his grandfather actually goes to John and asks him to take Jimmy in as a hand. And like, there's this conversation that happens between the two of them that we're clear that Jimmy's grandfather knows what goes on at the Yellowstone and knows that you basically can be inducted into them. You get branded with a Y on your chest, and it means you belong to the Yellowstone for life. The only way out is 6 feet under, okay? Not everyone who works there is a branded man, but there are. And we know that that is Lloyd, who I mentioned at a time, Rip. We actually see that Casey has a brand at one point. and then Jimmy's someone who gets one. So those are the people that we know about now who have it. And so Jimmy, he gets this chance or he's gonna die basically. And so Rip is the one who goes to get him. Now Jimmy knows nothing about being a rancher, nothing about being a cowboy, and so he definitely has to start from the very bottom, and we definitely see Jimmy on some shaky ground in the beginning, and he is a lot of the comic relief that happens in this first season, and that's why I'm mentioning him. Jimmy does have a pretty amazing character arc through the 4 seasons that we'll touch on, but again, I just don't care for Jimmy much past the first and second season, so I won't bring him up a ton, but a lot of people really love his storyline, and he will actually be a part of a spin-off that is supposed to be coming from Taylor Sheridan. So there's that. But he ends up being branded, and you give your soul to the Yellowstone, and they also will then be your family forever. So it's an exchange, and that's why a lot of the people who have the brand, the Yellowstone is their only family. So there's that. Okay, now I'm going to go into season 2. And again, I'm not giving full-blown spoilers for everything. I hope you see now where I'm kind of going with this. But we're moving along into season 2 because there's more and more to talk about with each season that we get into. So with this, we have John starting to feel his age, and he has this cancer scare that ends up being an ulcer, but it does come about in a super dramatic fashion. Okay, there's a scene where we find out what's going on with him because his ulcer like bursts and he like collapses, and like literally the vet cauterizes his ulcer like while they're doing cow stuff. Like it's a lot. Okay, it's a lot. There is some gore and like nastiness in this, so just be prepared for that. But it was made worse by him not going to the doctor when he felt something. But the thing is, we find out like him going to the doctor and having scans to see what was going on, like word gets around, and he doesn't want his enemies or people who are looking for a weakness to know that he might have an illness. And so because of that, that's what causes his ulcer to get to such a point that it almost kills him when it bursts in a really bad way. It's so foolish. Anyway, very frustrating. But he doesn't think his kids are going to continue his legacy after he dies, and it really weighs on him. And he's right. Probably the one of his sons who might possibly keep going would be Casey, but also Casey doesn't feel as deeply connected to the Yellowstone yet as John wants him to be, and that's something he very much is wanting to push over the seasons as we watch that relationship. There's a lot of strife because of that. And he now not only has Rainwater and Dan Jenkins causing him problems, but we have the Beck brothers coming in to stir up shit, okay? And this is kind of interesting, though, because what we'll see through season 2, which is, it's a tie between season 2 and parts of season 4, but to me, season 2 is the most strongly put together season. Like, it's the season I'm most likely to go back to and rewatch parts of it. I enjoy it so much. But yeah, we have Rainwater, Jenkins, and John Dutton, and then we have the Becks who are threatening kind of all of them and what they want to do. And storylines that are like started by the Becks do carry on through seasons in the future because of the company and the people that they like work with and things like that. But Casey's on the ranch without his family right now because Monica and Tate are actually staying somewhere else, and John is putting him to work. He's a little bit lost and he's not sure where he fits, but he's pretty good at killing people, is what he says about it. So Beth takes offense to this, though, because she's working to protect the family ranch all the time. And she's been expanding the Dutton land by buying up every available property that she can. And meanwhile, Rip Wheeler really comes into his own this season with his loyalty to Dutton. And he also, his like love with Beth, in my opinion, really is solidified in this season. They become much less of an off and on and much more of like, it's finally time for us to be together, even though the last 20 years we've been on a rock and roller coaster all this time. So Rip proves to be extremely loyal to John and is his, like, as we said, his enforcer, his top man. And as John says, he knows that he can trust Rip because he's the only one who doesn't benefit once he's gone. He may be considered like the son, like his son in some ways, and we'll get into more of that later. But when John dies, and if the Yellowstone wouldn't be anymore, like Rip doesn't have a home. He doesn't have anywhere to go. he doesn't even legally have an identity because of how he was brought into the Yellowstone as a young man. Like, he doesn't have anywhere to go. So he really, truly is ride or die for the Yellowstone, where his kids, like, again, like, Beth is doing everything she can for the ranch, but she's doing it for her dad. If her dad were to die, she literally said she would burn it down. Like, she doesn't care for it. She has horrible memories that lead back to it. She doesn't care about it at all. So Jamie is getting hungry for power, and when he meets with a journalist who is looking for dirt on the Yellowstone, he finds himself in over his head and possibly on the wrong side of his father. He realizes he made a horrible mistake and withdraws from the race. So, and this is for Attorney General, I believe, is what he's going for. I think that's what he's going for at this time. He runs for different things. Fuck Jamie. I don't like Jamie. But he knows certain things that the family has done. Like, he knows their dirty deeds, and he would never want to betray his family with them, because he knows, honestly, that it would spell his death if he ever did that, like, for real. But he also, like, can't help but grasping for more power. And so he has this interview, like, with this journalist, and, like, she starts to discover too much, and he actually ends up having to kill her. And it's pretty intense. So Rip, who of course gets called in to handle dirty situations, warns him that if he does become a problem, Jamie will be taken care of as well, and that Rip will do what he has to do to protect the family, and if that means taking out Jamie, he will. Now, these are a little bit of, like, big words for him to say, because I'm not sure that John would just be okay with, at this point, just offing Jamie if he, like, went too far. I'm not saying we don't ever get to that point, but at this point, I'm like, Rip, those are kind of big words for you right there to say, but you know what? Rip will do what he's got to do. So, also for Jamie, his girlfriend and campaign manager ends up knowing that he killed that journalist, and when she finds out she's pregnant, she runs away from him because she's like, I don't want anything to do with this. Now, his, like, campaign manager, assistant person, she was super irritating to me through the whole thing. Although, like, you know, definitely egging him on into certain situations that he got into. And then when she realized, like, oh, this isn't just political maneuverings, like, they kill people, she's terrified and runs away. But she doesn't tell anyone. But I'm not saying she's gone forever, okay? I believe I said her name. Her name is Christina. I said it before. So then the Duttons' feud with the Becks eventually turns violent, and the brothers send in their men to assault Beth. Okay, this is one of the most harrowing scenes in the whole show, in my opinion, but also one of the most powerful. Okay, so Beth and her assistant, she has an assistant who's this kind of adorable, like, preppy assistant guy, and she definitely teases him a lot because, again, Beth is a complete ballbuster. But she's at her office with him. They've set up an office in the town next to the Yellowstone now. She used to work in other places, but now she's, like, based from there. And she, you know, she's been doing her meddling on her side of things, and so they send some men in to threaten her, and they kill her assistant, okay, and they beat her and attempt to rape her, okay? So trigger warning for all those things, is incredibly violent. She is able to get a call off to Rip, and so Rip shows up and takes care of business, and for the first time truly tells her that he loves her. And this is a really beautiful moment, okay? Because this is a story beat that's set up earlier in the season where he wants to tell her how he feels about her, and she's like, I'm not ready to hear it right now. Like, I know that's how you feel, but wait until I need you to tell me so that it means something. And this is the moment that he does it. And if you can't tell where my biases lie by this point, it's with this couple, okay? I could burn this entire other story except for Beth and Rip, and I would be here for it, okay? I love them. But Beth is severely beaten. He actually got shot in this as well, but he survives. And then at the same time that this is happening, they try to take out Jenkins, and they kidnap Tate, okay? So Tate, which is Casey's son, gets kidnapped. So when this happens, Jenkins and Rainwater meet at the Dutton Ranch, and they have a talk, and they all agree that whatever trouble they have, we're saving it for another day. This is not how we do business. We don't attack people's daughters and sons, or in grandsons. That's not how we do business. So no matter how much these three men hate each other, they're going to work together for this now. So they're willing to share information, and John is perfectly planning to kill these men. So they make this little bit of like a dirty deal so that everybody in that circle is culpable in the kills, but he's like, his men are going to make sure that it happens. So Casey and Rip, plus the sheriff and Rainwater's team from the reservation, end up taking on both of the Beck brothers and rescuing Casey's son before the season closes as well, because Rip goes in a very dangerous position for this. He's definitely risking himself, and Beth very much, like, she knows he's going to do it. She knows that it's for saving her nephew, but also they've just admitted their love for each other, and she doesn't want him to go. But John has like updated his will and changed some things, and he has this amazing letter for Rip, and he actually gives him a cabin that's on the land for his own, because it's a whole thing. But Rip, he's been at the bunkhouse, and then he was in the foreman's house, but then he had to give that up to Casey, so he doesn't have a place that's really his. And John makes it clear in this letter that he considers Rip a true son of his, that though it's not by blood, it's by blood in a different way. Like, Rip has literally shed blood for them and would shed it all. And it's a beautiful moment. Beth reads this letter to him, and he gets the cabin, and it's really beautiful because Rip like cries. So I'm just saying, it hurts my heart. But yes, we rescued Tate. All that's done, and that's the end of season 2. So we got rid of the Becks, and so it's now kind of seen like who's going to be the next trouble that comes to town. So on to season 3. We're not doing as bad as I thought we would do. I knew this video was going to be long. So, season 3, I have much more notes for as well. For season 3, Monica and Tate are now back on the ranch. Tate is having nightmares about his kidnapping and where he was being kept. We're not like 100% clear everything he went through, but from what it looked like, they were keeping him like blindfolded and kept in like a bathroom. So it doesn't look like any like abuse was put on him, but that would still be an extremely traumatizing situation for a child. So I'm definitely not downplaying that at all. And so he's having a lot of nightmares. And so John suggests that they get him out into nature, have him be away from everything and be able to center himself. And so they end up deciding to do kind of like a cattle drive. I mean, there are cattle drives that need to happen, but usually John and the family don't go with. But John and Tate and like Casey and even Monica will go out there now and then. They're doing like a cattle drive on some of the acres, and Tate gets to stay out in the beautiful nature for this time. And I think it's really sweet. And I just really love that. So Monica and Casey are also getting a chance to reconnect, and there's very interesting situations with the voyeuristic wolf that come about during this season and next, and so that's why I'm mentioning it now. But there are multiple times when Casey and Monica are being intimate, and there's a wolf watching them, or watching them at different times. And again, this will come into play later, so I'm mentioning it now. But it is nice to see them reconnecting, and I'm really glad that that relationship is working for them. Let's say that. So John must step down as livestock commissioner because the deaths involved end with rescuing Tate. Like, he overused his powers and broke a lot of rules to do that. But of course we don't regret it because we got Tate back. And so first Jamie takes over, but then he does end up becoming Attorney General in the interim. So he had dropped out of that race. He didn't get elected, but then he becomes the interim one anyway. And so Casey gets the role, and this role suits him really well, actually. Like, he is meant to be a leader of men in a certain aspect, and he does a really good job with this role, and he actually helps a lot of people, but he still can work for the family when we need it. So the Beck brothers, their death has left a power vacuum behind, and Market Equities is trying to worm its way in. So we have Rourke Morris, who sweeps in and goes head to head with Beth, who she is always ready for some corporate espionage and getting into trouble here. So she causes their stock to short and costs them billions, but she ends up losing her job. But they don't want the land for condos. They want to build an airport, and they're being very aggressive about it. And that is going to piss a lot of people off, okay? Not just how they want to use eminent domain to take parts of Yellowstone, but this would adversely affect the Broken Rock Reservation as well, because there will be horrible emissions from planes and vehicles and parking lots built and all these things. So this again kind of keeps both Chief Rainwater and John like on the same side for the next little bit here too, because neither of them wants that to happen. Even though they're being tempted, like Rainwater's being tempted with casinos and with benefits and with a lot of things, he still knows it would be like bad for the area, because it also brings a lot of crime and drugs into the area and things that are already plaguing the native community there. Like having them have a casino and have more money isn't always a better thing. So Rourke hires men to beat up some of the Yellowstone employees. So this is actually Colby and Teeter, right? So Teeter is that feisty hillbilly girl that I mentioned, and her and Colby, I kind of have like a flirtation that's been going on, and I think they're out like skinny dipping, and they get beat up this night. And so Colby, Teeter, and Ryan get to be a part of the revenge attack on them, and then they actually accept their brand that night, and so they become like official parts of the Yellowstone as well, which is really powerful. And it's actually Casey who's initiating the brands this time, and this is the first time that he's doing that. So Beth shares, okay, here we go. So Beth shares a really hard truth with John, that without the land grants that they receive, they would not be able to afford the taxes, and their best bet is to sell out and keep what they can get. They have lots of capital and local power and, you know, the equity that they have with all the land and things they own, but they're very cash poor. They don't have the money in the bank to pay the taxes. It's because of, like, again, like state land grants that they get for that they're able to keep going. And so since everything is tied up that way, like they could slowly drain them of what they have, and they would have to start selling off pieces to be able to pay the taxes every year anyway. So John says no. He understands the risks, but he promised his daddy when his father was dying that he would rather lose it than break it up into pieces bit by bit. So, okay, now we're gonna learn some really hard truths about Beth. So this was some other trigger warnings as well. And we're really in this season is the season of the beautiful romance between Beth and Rip. Okay, it's really beautiful. But now we're finding out some parts of their past, because we know that they've been on again, off again for many years, but it really started all the way back when they were teenagers. And when Rip first came to the Yellowstone, because of the traumatic past that he had, his father had killed his mother and younger brother, and then Rip actually killed his father. And they just kind of had Rip like be erased from, like they had it be like he died at this time too, kind of thing. And then he was brought to the Yellowstone, as we said, as a teenager, and he just never left. But he doesn't legally exist anywhere. Just want to put that out there too. But anyway, Rip and Beth, they started messing around way back when they were kids, and Beth actually became pregnant. And at the time, she was still pretty close with her older brother Jamie, so she turned to him for help. Now, in previous seasons, we've seen how much she loathes Jamie. She has nothing good to say about him. She hates him. She threatens him all the time, and Jamie always takes it for the most part. And we don't know why this is. Like, is Jamie just a pussy? Like, what's going on? What's happening? And so we find out that when she found out she was pregnant, she actually went to Jamie for help, and she knew that her and Rip weren't in any place to have a child, and knew that her, you know, family would be very ashamed of this, and it might even cause bad backlash for Rip if his father knew they were fooling around and that this had happened. And so Jamie takes her to a clinic to help her get a pregnancy termination, but they are actually doing mandatory sterilizations if you get a pregnancy termination there. And this was something that they were actually doing to Native women. So there's a whole lot of nastiness all wrapped up in this. But Jamie didn't tell Beth what would happen if she had an abortion at this clinic. And so she blames him for what he did. He's fully aware of the cost, but he didn't tell Beth beforehand what would be happening if she had this termination here. And so he effectively suggested his sister to force sterilization as a teen. I don't know why he thought that would be a good idea to do to a young woman, even if she had gotten into a tough situation. And it's horrible. It's gut-wrenching. I've only watched that scene one time. You know, we're not even like seeing anything, but for me, it fully makes me hate Jamie even more. And I was like, yes, I'm vindicated. I can hate him. And people can make whatever arguments they want that Jamie was young as well, but he still knew that not telling her what the cost of this abortion would be would have been something that freaked her out. And he chose not to tell her. And so I hate him. And I hate him forever. And I really hate him because it's causing Beth a lot of insecurities now as a 38-year-old woman who is finally with the love of her life. And he's never got to have a family of his own. And now he can't have children with her anyway. And so she has a lot of pain with that. And so John finds out about this, and it drives another wedge between him and Jamie as well. Now, the person who doesn't know, though, is Rip. He's never known about this. Like, he just knew that, I think she even tells him that she wasn't really pregnant at all. I can't quite remember the scene, but either he knows that they had an abortion and got her taken care of, or I think she tells him that she got her period and it wasn't really, again, I can't remember. But either way, he has no idea what the cost of this was or what really happened. But it is part of the reason why she was never fully committing to him before, and why she has a lot of self-hatred and just so much damage. Okay, she also has mommy issues, which we didn't even get into because there's too much other stuff to talk about, but it's a lot of damage. Okay, so another huge thing that happens that has to do with Jamie this season that I have to mention is he ends up finding out that he's been adopted, because I think he has to put like a DNA sample in or fingerprints in or something for the new job that he has. And in doing so, like, he's trying to find, they need his birth certificate or something. Anyway, and so the county records office ends up telling him that, like, your birth certificate's under a different name than you told me. Thanks, buddy. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a Dutton. And he finds out he's not. So he was actually adopted by the Duttons. He's not really of their blood. But his father, who is, or was in prison, killed his mother when she started being a sex worker to get the drugs that she wanted. So his father killed his mother, and he ended up being adopted by John and Evelyn. And so this is Garrett. This is the guy that I mentioned I was going to say who he was. So this is Garrett Randall. And so he is Jamie's bio dad, and he shows up in seasons 3 and 4 of this show. So what else to talk about with season 3? So yes, more Beth and Rip. Beth and Rip have basically moved in together, and he was there for her convalescence time and to take care of her. There are some beautiful, painful scenes of him just being peace for her and her not knowing how to handle that peace. And it's so stinking beautiful. I know I'm a romance lover, so I'm more into this than other people are, but oh God, it's so beautiful. And also, he won't ever ask her father for her hand in marriage because he doesn't feel like he deserves her. Even though John has said he's like a son to him now, he doesn't feel that. So Beth actually asks permission, and she does so, and she actually proposes to him. And something that's happening right at the end of the season, which we have some other stuff to talk about, but Rip actually goes to his mother's grave and digs it up to get her wedding ring, which will come up later. But Beth is just macrame enough to appreciate that. So then we begin to the end of this, and there are 3 big things that happen. 3 of the Dutton power players are all attacked at the same time, okay? So Beth, she is at work with her new assistant, and there is a bomb that gets sent there, and so she opens it, and we don't know what happens to her. We know that Beth's assistant Shirley died, but we don't know what happened to Beth. And then at the same time, Casey is attacked by multiple gunmen at his office, and the last we see of him, he's overturning a desk to hide behind fire, and Monica panics on the other end of the phone. Like, I think he's on the phone with her. There's also someone who is like trying to attack Tate and Monica, and they're at the Yellowstone at the ranch. And then there's John, who is stopped on the side of the road to help a woman and her son with a flat tire when a mysterious van drives up and asks if he's John Dutton, and then they shoot at him. And so both the mother and John are killed right away. And so the last we see of John at the very end of the season is him pulling out his phone, trying to make a call, and his phone has been shot. And he's lying on the ground bleeding out. Okay? All right. Season 4. Oh boy. So, we begin season 4 with John in a coma. Well, first, it picks up exactly where we were at. Okay? So, we see that Beth has lived. She's climbing out of the building. Half of her face is like burned off, and she's like asking for a cigarette. It's crazy. Casey ends up getting out of there. Monica and Tate, everything's in like disarray with them, but the bunkhouse men end up being there, and they're able to help with the men who are trying to kill everyone there. And John ends up in a coma. So we get to see what happens with that in like an opening scene, and then we skip ahead. I think it's like 6 weeks or something. I can't remember what the time is, but we begin the season and John's in a coma and he's waking up from it. Beth has scars on like some, not a ton like on her face, they're healing, but we'll see later in a love scene that her entire back is scarred, which is pretty intense. And then, Casey, Monica, and Tate are on the Yellowstone, but Tate has severe PTSD and things are not going super well for the two of them. Turns out that Garrett, Jamie's dad, knows more than he's saying, but Jamie is getting to see his son for the first time, so that was a huge drop that we had. So Christina is back, and she had actually like not hooked up as in like the nasty, but like she is in contact with Jamie's dad, Garrett, and they have this like secret location where they're trying to help Jamie maneuver things to get things where they need to be. But Beth is very sure that Jamie knows more than he says, and she's ready to kill him the first chance she gets, just flay him alive. And so Jamie has exiled himself from the ranch because he's saying he needs plausible deniability, the things he was trying to do to keep people safe. We don't know. We're not sure. Beth gets called by her old boss. They are trying to, get her to hush up about what happened, and kind of strip her of everything that she had done for him over their time. But what he doesn't know is that she bought a lot of the land, she wasn't buying all of it for his company. She was buying a lot of it for the Yellowstone. And so they think that they have totally weaseled her out of something, and they didn't. And this is one of my favorite scenes. I literally have a t-shirt that says this, because Bob is like, there is always a bigger bear, Beth. And Beth is like, Bob, I am the bigger bear. And it's fantastic. It's one of my favorite scenes of season 4. It's magnificent. And so Beth actually gets a call from Market Equities with Caroline Warner, who is above who, what was his name? Rourke was. Now, I think that I didn't mention this, but Rourke actually gets killed by Rip in the beginning of this season with a rattlesnake. He takes a rattlesnake out to where Rourke is. Maybe it's not a rattlesnake. It's some kind of snake that is poisonous, and he throws the snake at this guy, and he gets killed. So Rip takes care of that guy. But Caroline Warner, who is a very high up CEO for Market Equities, asked to hire Beth, and so Beth gets hired to work for this company. But it's also so they can keep an eye on her. So yeah, she also has pity for a sad little boy named Carter, whose father I think has just died in the hospital. He's a deadbeat, and she brings him home to the Yellowstone, and Rip sees what she's doing with him, and he's not happy about it. He is very much like, he's not me. He doesn't replace us having our own kid. And I mean, she, again, hasn't told him why she can't have children, but she said she can't. And she's like, someday you're going to resent me that I wasn't able to give you children, and I want you to have a son. And he's like, baby, that's never gonna happen. And she's like, yes, it will. And I'm like, honey, no, it won't. Okay. He's loved you for 20 fucking years. It's not gonna change anything, but he's not so sure about it, or she's not so sure about that. So we have Carter, who he is a little bit of a shit, but he also is really growing on me throughout the season, and he grows on them too. There are some good moments with them as we go. There is actually a point too where, so I don't think I'm mentioning it right now. Here we go. Casey moves his family to their own home, which I think is good because he doesn't completely distance himself, like he's still the livestock commissioner, he's still working with the Yellowstone, but him and his family now have like their own home. They adopt a dog. And sometime during the season, we actually find out they are expecting another child. He also continues to see this wolf now and then throughout the season. And at one point, he actually completes a native ritual to commune with the wolf that he keeps seeing, and hoping to discover some answers. And there is an episode where he does that, and he actually talks with his dead brother, and he has some interesting interactions. And he says that in his vision quest that he sees the end of us, so we don't know what that means. Also throughout the season, there's this hippie vegan named Summer who shows up, and they are, what's it called, protesting different things at different places, and her and John actually end up sleeping together at one point, which kind of icked me out a little bit. I was like, what was wrong with the governor? I love the governor, but they can't do that all the time. But Beth actually doesn't trust this lady and doesn't get why her dad is choosing to sleep with this lady. Is like, I don't get it. I mean, there's a funny scene where she wants her dad to find someone to hook up with, but doesn't approve of this woman who's younger than she is. She's kind of weirded out by it. And so Beth actually kind of tricks Summer into protesting the market equities, something they're hoping to build. And she ends up getting arrested because there's a riot that ends up happening, and she gets charged with a life sentence. And when John finds out everything that's going on with this, he's very upset, actually. So this is where I was going to say, so Casey and Monica, and then they moved out. And one of the things that happened at the beginning of the season is that the cabin that Beth and Rip live in, it was burned down by the people who were coming through and trying to kill people at the Yellowstone. And so they've been back in the foreman's house. But John doesn't like not having no family live with him, so he asked Beth and Rip to move into the house with him. And so they've been living in the big house. So when John finds out what Beth did that caused Summer to be in a lot of trouble, he is very upset, and he tells her to leave. Now he's just having an angry moment, and Beth, this whole show, she's been doing everything that needs to be done to keep the Yellowstone going and to keep them working. And by having this protest happened, there ended up being news reporters and people who videoed what happened and made market equities look very bad, which was why she did that. But she used Summer to do it, which was a bit spiteful of her. And so John is like, she wasn't an enemy, honey. You didn't need to do that. And she's like, anyone who's not family is an enemy. And so I did. And he's like, you need to go. So she, of course, panics because she is always a daddy's girl. And to have him be so upset with her is very much she can't handle it. She can handle anyone else being angry at her, but not her dad. And so she's gonna run out. And Rip catches her packing a bag. And this is a very powerful moment, y'all, okay? Because Rip tells her that this is the last time, because they're engaged, they're supposed to be getting married, they've committed to each other at this point. She's practically adopted a kid for him, and she's just gonna run. She's like, I just need to go for a while. And Rip tells her, he's like, honey, if you leave this time, when you come back, you can't come back to me. You need to stay and work it out. And it's really, really powerful because Rip doesn't really stand up to Beth, and not because he is a pussy by any means or a weakling with her, but he just appreciates everything about her, and he's normally fine with her being her crazy ass self. He loves that about her. But in this case, it's him being kind of vulnerable of you can't leave me again. You can't walk out this time. We have to face this together, and if you run away, we're done this time. So this causes Beth to actually go apologize to her father for what she did, which she doesn't do that ever. So he forgives her, and he's really proud of her for doing that. And so she doesn't run away, so we're very proud of her. But she is ready to prove once and for all that Jamie knew what the fuck was going on, and prove that, like, he can't be trusted. But John also wants him in their pocket still. Like, he doesn't want to lose Jamie, but she needs to find something. So what she does is she scams her way into a fake conjugal visit to meet with this guy named Terrell Riggins. And so he's a convict who Jamie's biological father was cellmates with, so who Garrett's cellmate was. And there's a paper trail on the Dutton attack that leads to Riggins. So when Beth shows up looking for answers, he claims that he's just a middleman, and said that he told the other guy that, and the other guy is Jamie. So with that knowledge, Beth goes into kamikaze mode. She does something first, though. When she's on the way back from this, she wore this like really sexy outfit to like sneak her way into the conjugal visit thing. And on the way back to the Yellowstone, she kidnaps a priest and brings him to the Yellowstone, and goes to get her dad and Rip, and says, we're getting married right now because there's something I need to do, and I want to be married before I do it. And I was kind of worried what this meant. Like, I was kind of scared what this meant. But anyway, so Rip is beside himself, excited. He goes and gets Lloyd, who is his like male bestie in the bunkhouse. And so he goes to get him, and he goes to get his mother's ring, and so they get married right there, and it's so cute. And then she goes to confront Jamie with a gun in hand, and she gives him some unappealing options, but he confirms that he knows that Garrett ordered the hit. Like, he didn't know beforehand, but he knew afterwards. And so she gives him a way out of her telling Rip, like, she threatens to tell Rip why she can't have children. And it's a really powerful moment, because I've always wondered why she didn't tell. And to me, it always meant there was a little bit of part of her that like didn't want Jamie's death, but also like wanted that to hold over him forever. And now she plays that card, and she's like, I'm gonna tell him. And he's like, please, 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 please tell me what I have to do, because he knows that's a death sentence. Like, Rip is taking him out if he finds out the pain that he's caused Beth for the last 20 years, because she's been in agony over not being able to have kids. Like, she just has. Which I'm not saying she would have been a great mom or anything, okay? We're not saying that, but the option has been taken away since she was young. And so she gives him a way out. And so that way out is Jamie kills his father. He kills Garrett, and when he's dumping the body, Beth gets a photo of him and says that she owns him now. And then she gives that photo evidence to her father and says, there you go. And then at the very kind of end of this too, we find out as well that John is going to be running for governor. That maybe happens a little bit earlier than I've said it, but like, that's going to be a big plot going into season 5. And yeah, there's also Beth getting threatened by Caroline Warner, because Beth had backstabbed them, but it turns out she did corporate espionage. And so Caroline Warner is like, you're going to go to jail for a really long time for this. And Beth is kind of just like, whatever. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm sure that's going to be coming back around when we get into the next season. And so, yeah, looking into season 5, we have John campaigning to be governor, and going to war with Caroline Weaver. And those are kind of the big things. So those are the points that were important for me. Now, there's a couple other things I'll touch on. Like I said, I did not go over every single storyline. There's some of them that I just don't care about as much, and they're also like, this video would be as long as the season itself if I did every little bit of it. So the storylines I haven't touched on, okay, really had to do with the bunkhouse. There's drama that has to do with the bunkhouse. There's like ladies that show up sometimes that are with some cowboys and then other cowboys, and they get jealous. There's this guy named Walker that I mentioned that he gets brought on to the team, and he's not comfortable with a lot of the things that are happening, but he's become a branded man, so he can't ever leave. At one point, Casey actually helps him leave, but he says you have to go far away. And then in season 3, he pops back up at a bar, and Rip is like, you were supposed to fucking kill this guy and you didn't. And Casey's like, I just didn't want to murder him. And Rip's like, that's what we're supposed to do, and you didn't. And now he knows shit, and he's just walking around. So we have to corral Walker back in. So now Walker's a part of them again. And so there's all this stuff. Then there's the stuff with Jimmy. Like I said, Jimmy, he's not my favorite. Some people absolutely love him. I really liked in season 1 and 2 when he was learning to be, you know, a cowboy and getting better at that and, you know, falling in love with the horses and the work. There's a point where he actually starts entering rodeos to try to earn money, because he does owe some money from his previous life. And instead of telling the guys, because like they're his family now, like they would have helped him out, they know he's not doing drugs anymore and there's no like risk of that happening, his grandfather ends up being killed by these thugs, which is horrible. And the Yellowstone men, they're like, we back up our boys, like we'll help you get revenge for this. But he ends up being in rodeos and he gets hurt, and John tells him he can't be involved in those anymore because like he's going to waste himself away if he keeps doing these. Well, he does try again, and so that is like at the beginning of season 4. Once John has gotten out of the hospital, Jimmy gets sent down to the 4 Sixes ranch in Texas, and the 4 Sixes is supposed to be a spin-off that Taylor Sheridan is putting together. Taylor Sheridan also shows up in many of the episodes. He's this guy named, wow, I just forgot what his name is. But he's the one who actually drives Jimmy down to Texas, and Jimmy ends up meeting a new love interest down there. He has a love interest in the earlier seasons that we don't like. But he ends up like getting engaged when he's down there. And so the 4 Sixes is going to start eventually with him being with the 4 Sixes and we getting to learn more about that place, and he'll have a fiance down there. So, yeah, those are, you know, of course, there's other stuff. There's different plot lines with Monica and things like that too, but these are the things that I found the most important. And I feel like you'd have a good feel for what's going on. Or maybe this was a recap for you. Just to reiterate some of my absolute favorite scenes in this, I hope I mentioned them. Absolutely love, of course, not Beth's assault, but the aftermath of it, seeing Rip take care of her and just bring her, you know, in close and reiterate like how devoted he is to her. I love that. I love when John acknowledges him as a son. Of course, I fucking love that stuff. I love John's moments with Tate. There's some really beautiful moments with them together. And I actually really love a couple of moments with Mo. Like I said, Mo is this guy's real name too. But Mo is the bodyguard for Rainwater, and there's some really great like wise moments from Mo at different times as well. So yeah, I love this show. I hope you'll give it a try. I hope this has either caught you up and you're ready to start season 5, or I've intrigued you just enough to go and watch it. If you're a romance reader who, you know, because you're my regular viewers, I'm not saying that the romances are the biggest part of the show, okay? But there are some that I burn for them, okay? I love both. I love Casey and Monica, and I love Beth and Rip. I would die for them. They're amazing. And I think Taylor Sheridan, especially in seasons 3 and 4, he saw how much people were reacting to them. And Cole Hauser and Kelly Riley, that's the couple that plays Beth and Rip, they have amazing chemistry together. It's fantastic. And I just love whenever they're on screen together. It just lights up for me. So anyway, if you are a longtime watcher of this, tell me your favorite episodes, your favorite scenes, what's your favorite couple, what's your favorite storyline, what are you looking forward to most in season 5? Yeah, what are your least favorite things? How much do you hate Jamie? You've got to hate Jamie, right? We hate Jamie. He's the worst. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this. I will have the sources that I use for this listed down below, because I did not from scratch write all of these summaries. I did have some help from some different wikis and some Collider articles, so I'll have my sources listed down below. Definitely want to give credit to that. And yeah, make sure you are ready to watch Yellowstone on November 13th. And also, I'm gonna pin a comment down below. Let me know if you would like me to do episode by episode reviews of this show, because that's something that I'm thinking about, and if enough of you are interested, I will do that for season 5. So thank you so much for watching, my friends. If you liked this, make sure you subscribe to my channel and like this video. It really helps me out, and I'll see you next time. Bye.